Elias wiped his hands on his jacket and stared at the hologram, convinced it had to be a mistake. He was a technician, a former exploration pilot, yes, but long retired from anything remotely heroic. He fixed machines for credits and kept his head down. Empires didn't summon men like him. "You sure that's for me?" he asked the station AI. "Identity verified," the AI replied calmly. "Elias Jonah Mercer. You are requested aboard the Imperial vessel Radiant Silence within 6 standard hours." The dock workers nearby fell silent. A few glanced at him with open suspicion, others with fear. The Aurelian Imperium did not request, it claimed. And when it claimed a human, the reasons were usually grim: forced conscription, interrogation, or worse. Elias had exactly 6 hours to wonder which crime he'd committed without knowing it. The Radiant Silence dwarfed Kepri, 9 like a god looming over an anthill. Its hull shimmered with living metal, etched in golden glyphs that crawled like sunlight across water. Elias felt small as he was escorted through corridors that curved organically, grown rather than built. The Aurelians were nothing like humans. Tall, luminous beings with skin like polished pearl and eyes that glowed faintly from within, as if stars were trapped behind them. Their movements were fluid, graceful, and utterly confident. An empire that spanned half the galaxy had no need for haste. Elias was led into a vast chamber that took his breath away. The ceiling arched impossibly high, displaying a rotating projection of the galaxy. Worlds shimmered into existence, then faded, replaced by others. At the far end, upon a dais of light, sat Her Radiance, Empress Sailvara of the Aurelian Imperium. She was larger than the others, her presence filling the chamber like gravity itself. A crown of crystalline filaments hovered above her brow, slowly rotating. When her eyes fell upon Elias, he felt exposed in a way that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with truth. "Kneel," commanded a voice that resonated through his bones. Elias complied, heart hammering. "Elias Jonah Mercer," the Empress said. "You asked in your transmission response why you were wanted." He swallowed. "Yes, Your Radiance. I don't understand." She studied him in silence long enough that sweat trickled down his spine. Then she said, "Rise." He did, unsteadily. "You imagine," Sailvara continued, "that you are here because you have committed some transgression against my Imperium." Elias hesitated, then nodded. That seemed unlikely. A ripple passed through the Aurelians lining the chamber. Amusement, perhaps. "You imagine," she went on, "that you are insignificant, that your life has left no mark beyond the stations and worlds you have passed through." Her gaze sharpened. "That is where you are wrong." The middle of Elias's life had been spent far from empires and thrones, back when humanity was still feeling its way into the wider galaxy. He had been a pilot for the Odyssey Initiative, a joint exploration program meant to chart unclaimed systems and establish first contact protocols. On one such mission, his ship had encountered a dying world. The planet had been torn apart by tectonic instability, its surface cracking and collapsing into magma seas. Orbiting debris formed a ring of fire and stone. Automated distress beacons screamed into the void in a dozen alien languages. Against orders, Elias had descended. He remembered the heat warnings, the screaming alarms, and the way his co-pilot had begged him to abort. He remembered seeing the city, half submerged, buildings collapsing like sandcastles, and the creatures running, luminous and fragile. They were Aurelians. Elias had no idea who they were at the time. He only knew that people were dying. He had landed where he could, torn open the cargo bay, and loaded as many survivors as possible. When his ship was full, he'd taken off, flown them to the nearest stable moon, and transmitted coordinates to every frequency he could reach before the planet finally tore itself apart. He never learned what happened to those he saved. The Odyssey Initiative reprimanded him for disobeying orders. The Imperium, unaware of humanity then, never contacted him. Life went on. Elias eventually left exploration, tired of risking everything for missions that ended in paperwork and silence. He assumed that day had vanished into history. The Empress's next words shattered that illusion. "You are the first human to set foot upon an Aurelian world," SciFi said, "and the first outsider to choose our lives over your own safety." Elias stared at her. "That was decades ago." "For you," she replied softly. "For us, it is yesterday." With a gesture, the galaxy projection shifted. A planet appeared, whole and vibrant, its continents glowing with life. Aurelians walked its surface in vast cities of light. "That world," the Empress said, "exists because of you." Elias's breath caught. "You carried 612 of my people from certain death," she continued. "Among them were engineers, scientists, and leaders who would later guide our evacuation and reconstruction. Among them was my mother." The chamber fell utterly silent. Elias tried to speak, but no words came. "My mother survived because you disobeyed your orders," SciFi said. "She lived to rebuild our civilization and to give birth to me." Her eyes burned brighter. "Every Aurelian child learns your name." Elias felt dizzy. "Then why now?" "Because," the Empress replied, "the galaxy is changing." The Aurelians had watched humanity from afar for generations. A young species, reckless and divided, yet stubbornly compassionate. Where older empires calculated outcomes, humans acted on impulse, sometimes disastrously, sometimes magnificently. Now, a coalition of ancient powers was forming. They called themselves the Harmonized Accord, and they believed the time had come to impose order upon the galaxy, by force, if necessary. The Aurelians stood as one of the few powers capable of opposing them. But the Accord feared something. "They fear unpredictability," SciFi explained. "They fear those who choose mercy over logic. They fear humanity." Elias listened as the Empress laid out her plan. Not a war of annihilation, but a stand, a declaration that the galaxy would not be shaped solely by ancient hands. That younger species would have a voice. "And you," she said, "will be the symbol of that stand." He almost laughed. "I'm no diplomat. I'm barely a mechanic." "You are," she agreed. "And that is precisely why you matter." She rose from her throne and descended the dais until she stood before him. Up close, her light was warm, not blinding. "You asked why you were wanted," SciFi said quietly. "You imagined power, punishment, or sacrifice." She met his eyes. "We wanted to thank you." Elias felt something inside him crack. "And," she added, "to ask for your help once more." The broadcast echoed across the galaxy. A human stood beside the Aurelian Empress, dressed not in finery, but in a worn jacket patched from years of honest labor. He spoke not of strategy or superiority, but of a simple truth. "I didn't save those people because it was logical," Elias said. "I saved them because it was right." The Accord listened. Some scoffed. Others hesitated. But countless younger worlds heard something they had never heard before from the halls of power: validation. The stand did not become a war. Not immediately. Instead, negotiations fractured the Accord from within. Worlds withdrew. Alliances shifted. The galaxy breathed, uncertain but alive. When it was over, Elias returned to Kepri 9. He expected obscurity again. Instead, The recycler he had been fixing worked flawlessly. The station received priority supply shipments. Pirates avoided the system entirely. And once a year, without fail, a message arrived from a distant throne. Years later, long after the galaxy had grown accustomed to the idea that humanity mattered, Elias Mercer stood once more beneath an unfamiliar sky. The world was Aurelian Prime. Golden towers rose from fields of crystalline grass, their surfaces reflecting the soft glow of twin suns. The air hummed faintly with energy and life. Elias leaned on the railing of a balcony overlooking a city that existed because he had once ignored an order and followed his conscience. "You always look surprised," came a familiar voice. Empress Sailvara stepped beside him. No crown this time, no throne, just light woven into a form that had learned, over time, how to feel less distant. "I suppose I still am," Elias admitted. "I fix machines my whole life. Never thought I'd help fix a galaxy." She regarded him thoughtfully. "Machines break when neglected. So do civilizations." Below them, humans and Aurelians walked together through the streets. Engineers, students, diplomats, young species learning from an ancient one, and an ancient empire learning something new in return. Compassion had proven contagious. The harmonized accords still existed, fractured and cautious. Wars still flared in distant sectors. The galaxy had not become peaceful, but it had become aware. The idea that power alone defined worth had been challenged, and it could never fully return. Elias was older now. His hair had gone gray, his hands rougher than ever. He had refused titles, positions, statues. The Imperium had respected that, honoring him in the most human way possible, by letting him remain himself. "Do you ever regret it?" Sailvara asked quietly.
"That day.
The choice you made." Elias watched a group of children, human and Aurelian, laughing as they chased one another across the plaza. "No," he said without hesitation. "Because if I hadn't done it, this wouldn't exist." The Empress inclined her head. "Then the galaxy owes its future to a man who never sought credit." Elias smiled. "Sounds like humanity." When his time finally came, it was peaceful. No grand ceremony, no dramatic farewell. Just a quiet passing, surrounded by stars he had once crossed without knowing their names. Across the Imperium, lights dimmed for one full rotation. Across human space, ships paused in silence. And across the galaxy, the story endured. Not of an emperor, not of a conqueror, but of a human who asked why he was wanted, and learned that sometimes the smallest choices echo the longest.